Azure portal is Microsoft portal for managing your Azure components, cloud components. Then comes something called as Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps is a repository or is Microsoft way of managing your code repository and having some CI/CD or automated aspects and much more. So those who are familiar, who have heard something called as a GitHub, can consider Azure DevOps similar to GitHub, but with some other additional features and functionalities as well. And that's what we would be taking a look now. So in order for you to have Azure DevOps, when you're logged into my.visualstudio.com, when you log into my.visualstudio.com via the account, Microsoft account, there is an option to create an Azure DevOps for free. Let's take a look with respect to that offering. So here, there is an option called Azure DevOps. Correct. So for that, click on Get Started. Click the Login to the account. So once I log into that account, I'll be logged into something called as dev.azure.com. Now, can anyone share your screen so that I already have an Azure DevOps activated in my scenario, correct? So I would like someone to share the screen so that we can live demo someone to create it and you others can follow it. So who would like to share the screen?
I'm sharing, if it is okay.
Sure, anyone. So now log in to dev.azure.com. So portal.azure.com, dev.azure.com. Portal.azure.com is for Azure's homepage, whereas dev.azure.com is for developmental aspect of Azure DevOps. Correct? So click on Get Started with Azure. Scroll down. Okay, this is taking you to another page, correct? So
Yeah.
just type in Google create Azure DevOps for free. Free. Click on sign up for Azure DevOps services. Click on the first URL.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, scroll down. Scroll down. So one aspect is you need to have a Microsoft account, and that's the Microsoft account that you already have. Correct. Now click on the second URL. The go to Azure DevOps. It would take you to the next tab. Correct. It would take you to the same aspect. Get started with Azure. So I hope you understood. Correct. Either you can go via dev.azure.com, click on try Azure for free.
Ideally, it should take the account which you have already used. So
taking a lot of time.
Yes.
Hmm.
Use an existing subscription in your account. Click on that. Okay, unfortunately, it's taking you the other way route. Correct. For today, Microsoft has changed a couple of URLs. Let me get back to you for the correct URL. For today, I'll explain you what Azure DevOps is, and then we'll take a look on how to create it. I'll show that details tomorrow. It seems they have changed a couple of URLs.
Okay, sure.
So basically, once you log into dev.azure.com, it would take you to the Azure DevOps homepage. Now, Azure DevOps, consider Azure DevOps equivalent to the Azure portal homepage. Correct. Now, similar to how the Azure portal is linked, when you log into Azure portal, you are bound to a tenant. Correct. Similarly, I logged into Azure DevOps via this account. Now, this account belongs to multiple tenants. So, which tenant does the Azure DevOps have? So, in terms of comparison, consider dev.azure.com similar to Azure portal.azure.com, the homepage. Now, within Azure portal, the highest hierarchy is ignore tenant. Correct. Going forward in comparisons, we won't consider tenant because by default, tenant is the common top hierarchy across everywhere. Correct. So, in Azure, the highest hierarchy is something called as a subscription. Correct. Wherein you have a paid aspect for the same. In Azure DevOps, the highest hierarchy is something called as an organization. So once you create your own Azure DevOps, something called as an organization comes in. So let me go ahead and create a new organization. So in dev.azure.com, I'm signing for a new organization. So I say that Data Sharks Education is the new organization. I want all the projects to be hosted in Europe region, or let's say Southeast Asia Pacific. Then I need to provide the similar to how we are creating a subscription, we are creating a organization. Now, unlike subscription, which is cost bound, organization or Azure DevOps does not have any cost. It's a free, similar to how in GitHub, you have free GitHub version and you have a paid GitHub version as well. Correct. Similarly, Azure DevOps also has a free version. So I created an organization. So one Azure DevOps, one account can be part of multiple organizations. Similarly, similar to how one account can have multiple subscription, one account can have multiple organizations. Now, within an organization, the next hierarchy is something called as a project. Imagine that my organization, Data Sharks is my organization, education. Correct? Now, within Data Sharks, I conduct multiple boot camps. One boot camp is Microsoft Fabric. Another boot camp is Azure Data Engineering. Another boot camp is Power BI. So every boot camp can be considered as a different project for me. So my organization is Data Shark Education, which is equivalent to, let's consider a subscription in Azure portal world. Now within the organization, I might have different categorization of my projects. So the next hierarchy within the Azure DevOps post organization is something called as a project. So I would have Microsoft Fabric. I can make it public or private. But can you see in my organization settings, I have disabled making anything as public, because public meaning it can be accessible by anyone openly. Even if they have any access or not, they would be able to access it. As an organization, do I want my code to be publicly visible for anyone? That depends. In most of the cases, I do not want it. Hence, it would be private. And I'll go ahead and create a project. So, one can consider project equivalent to the resource groups that we created in the Azure portal. So, in case if I go back to the Microsoft Fabric is the project. In case if I go back to the organization level, I can see one project called Microsoft Fabric. Now I can create another project called Azure Data Factory or Azure Data Engineering. Those are another bootcamp that I take. It's like another project that I am managing. Correct? So I created another project. So it's like creating another resource group. So now in case if you want to understand, organization is like equivalent to the subscription. Within one subscription, how you could create multiple resource group. Similarly, within an organization, I can create multiple projects. I can grant users access at different project levels. And now let's take a look with respect to the organization settings and the project settings. So now I am at an organization level, that is DataSharks EDU. Now, within the organization, I'll go to some of the organization settings. Now, in the organization settings, I have selected the geo, the time zone. Now I can see that there is a limitation that I can only have 1,000 projects. Out of 1,000 projects, I have already created 2 projects. Currently, I am the owner of the organization. Hence, I can delete the entire organization. Now, within the organization, I can link the organization to a specific Active Directory, to a specific tenant. As of now, this is mapped to the tenant YLDF7. But since this account belongs to multiple tenants, I can switch the directory as well. I can move this Azure DevOps from YLDF7 to DataSharks or the default directory, the default tenant as well. Since this account belongs to 3 tenants, I am able to switch it across these 3 tenants. But for now, I'll keep it to the YLDF7 tenant only. Then there are other aspects within the organizations. Correct? That I won't bother you all with. There are some licensing concepts, etc. So now, these are the different aspects at an organization level. Now, within the organization, I have something called as projects. Now, let me click on this project. At a project, there is something called as project settings. Similar to how we had different security across subscription and resource group, similarly, you have access aspect across subscription and project. Sorry, organization and a project. I won't cover this in details because these are this Azure DevOps is a separate 9-hour session in itself, in case if anyone wants to understand it. For us, the basic understanding is we need to have an Azure DevOps. And I'll explain certain concepts of Azure DevOps that we need for Microsoft Fabric. So now I am within a project. Let's say I am within the Microsoft Fabric. Now within Microsoft Fabric project or within any project, you have something called as pipelines, test plans, and repositories, and boards. With respect to the repositories is where we would have the need. Before we proceed ahead, Pallavi, do you have any queries?
Yeah, so same way we are buying the subscription, we have bought subscription for the free. Same way we are buying this one, correct?
No, Azure DevOps is free, correct? Anyone can create
Yeah.
this. It seems Microsoft has changed certain aspect. I need to take a look, which I can provide tomorrow. Earlier, in case if you log into dev.azure.com, it used to ask you, if you saw, correct, how I created the new organization. Let me go
Mhm.
back to the home page, correct?
Because the same way, like have to provide the name and all these visa details and all that is coming in my case while
So
logging to dev.azure.com.
that's the thing, Pallavi, that I stated that in last 1 month, Microsoft has made multiple changes, which I am not aware of because of the misuse. I'm not sure whether the same change happened in the Azure DevOps aspect as well. Hence, I'll have to take a look and get back to you all tomorrow. Clear?
Okay.
But earlier, prior to 1 month, when you logged into azure.azure.com, this was the interface that used to be visible. That is, do you want to continue? And what organization do you all want to provide? This was the interface that used to pop in earlier. But now I
Okay,
am not
directly going
sure.
to here.
Sorry,
Directly that URL went to here.
correct, because it is a free aspect. Similar
Oh,
to how in GitHub you can create your own personal accounts and projects. Similar was the case. But I'm not sure what problems or misuse users have created because of which Microsoft has changed certain policies. So for that, I'll have to take a look myself.
okay, okay.
Clear?
Yeah.
So one case study got reduced for you all today. Else I was supposed to tell you all to create this. That I'll explain tomorrow because I'll have to do a proof of concept myself initially. Clear? So within the organization, there are projects. Now in projects, there is something called as a repositories that we are concerned with. So click on the repositories. Repositories is like creating different folders or different groupings. Imagine that Microsoft Fabric is a very vast technology, correct? Now within Microsoft Fabric, I'll have Power BI. I would have data engineering, etc. So these are subcategories within the Microsoft Fabric, correct? So subcategorization of code is what we call as repositories. So repositories logical grouping of similar code. Your project is a like an entire project. Now in a project, I can have multiple sub projects. Consider your repositories as code level for your sub projects. So now I need to create a repository. So click on, once you log into the project, click on the repositories. Then select this drop down. In that, there is an option to create a new repository. See, there are multiple ways via command lines that you can create a repository. But as I said, that's another 2 to 3 hour session in itself, Git and its policies. This session is not about that. I'll be showing you the simple way of creating it via portal. So those who are new to the concept of Azure DevOps or GitHub. So on repositories, click on this drop down besides the file. There you would have an option to click on new repository. So click on new repository. So in this new repository, provide a name called something. Correct. For now, I'll provide Power BI. Correct. And then click on create. So it would create a repository for me called Power BI. I can create multiple repositories within a project. So now I'll create a repository called data engineering. So now let's understand the hierarchy again in Azure DevOps. In Azure DevOps, we have an organization. Within an organization, I can have multiple projects. So within the DataSharks education, I have 2 projects. And you saw, right? I can have around 10,000 projects. Within the project, I can have multiple repositories. I have a repository data engineering. I have a repository Microsoft Fabric. And I have a repository called Power BI. So within one project, I can have multiple repositories. Now let's take a look with respect to this Power BI repository. Now within this Power BI repository, can you see a drop down called main? These are called branches. Now, what do we mean by branches? Imagine that as an organization, correct? Eventually, I'll grow across an organization. I only cannot keep on having all the boot camps. So I'll grow my training team as well. There can be a scenario wherein within Power BI itself, there would be 2 parallel sessions that would be going on by 2 different resources. So within the Power BI repository, I want 2 parallel aspects. That 2 parallel aspect is what we call as branching. What do we mean by branching? In project terminology, let's consider the actual understanding rather than this theoretical aspect. I have created a project. I have created a database. So for that database, I'll have a corresponding project available. Whatever is live in the production is like your main branch. Now imagine that within the database, I have 2 requirements. I have to make certain changes in the projects, in the databases. I have 2 requirements. And both the requirements are independent, let's say independent or let's say dependent. It does not matter. For now, in our scenario, let's consider both are independent requirements. So what I can do is I can allow 2 users to parallelly work on those 2 requirements separately. Now, since there are 2 users, I want to have 2 separate code aspects for their individual working purposes. That's what we call as branching strategy, branches. So what I can do is I can create branches, sub-branches from the main branch itself. So I'll go ahead and create a branch from the main branch, meaning whatever code is available in the main branch would create a subsection. Correct? So I'll create a new branch called F1. Correct? And then I can create another branch because there are 2 developers. I'll create 2 branches. But rather than based on F1, I want to base it on main branch itself and I'll create it as F2. Correct? So now I have 2 branches, F1 and F2 for developmental purpose, and we have a main branch. So within a repository, there can be multiple branches. Now let's understand the hierarchy. One organization can have multiple projects. One project can have multiple repositories. One repository can have multiple branches. Now, what do we mean by branches? Now, if you see, I have selected the F1 branch. In F1 branch, correct, I can add a new file or a new folder. Correct? I'll add a new folder called demo1. And I'll add a new file within that called test.txt. And I'll create it. I'll add this is demo1. And I'll commit these changes to this. Commit meaning up till now, this is just present in my web browser. I am now committing this to the Azure DevOps server. So now if you all see, within the F1 branch, I have this demo1 folder with test.txt file. Now, in case if I go to main branch, I am not able to see that folder. Or in case if I go to F1 branch, F2 branch, I won't be able to see because I created that in the F1 branch. Now, I want F1 branch is like my development branch. Similarly, in F2 branch, some new developer would create a new demo. Correct? Let's say okay. So in F2 branch, I want to create a new folder. Let's say demo2, test2.txt. This is demo2 and I'll commit this. So now I created two branches for my developmental purposes for two different developers and they created two demos in their respective boot camps. Now I want to preserve all the demos universally. Correct? Meaning I want a union of all. So what would happen is, what needs to happen is, next aspect is there's something called as a pull request. Now I want to pull the changes from my F1 branch, which is a developmental branch, into my main branch. As the name suggests, main is like your main branch. So in the pull request section, I click on new pull request. Now in the new pull request, I want to raise a pull request from F2 branch to the main branch. You all saw, correct? Let me duplicate it. Let me go to the main repository, main branch. Main branch as of now is empty. Now let me raise a pull request from F2 branch to the main branch. When I raise a pull request, you can see here in the files section, I see the delta changes that has happened. I'm seeing that a new folder got added. Plus meaning something new got added. I'll create this pull request. Once I create this pull request, I can approve it and complete it. Now what this is doing is, can you see here a property delete F2 after merging? Now what this would do is it would merge the F2 branch into the main branch and then delete the F2 branch. So the merging is now happening. It got merged. Now let me refresh this page. Can you see demo2 got added and the corresponding test ts2.txt file got added because I merged the development branch into the main branch. But now in case if I want to move to the F2 branch, it's not visible because when I raise the pull request, in that I had enabled the property to delete the F2 branch when it is merged. But is that the case always? No. Let me raise a pull request from my F1 branch to the main branch. Here it would show me the difference again. Let me raise a pull request. Here, I'll approve it. Now, while completing it, I'll remove this property, delete F1 after merging, and I'll merge it. So now it's merging it into the main branch. So now under files section, under main, demo1 got added, but F1 branch is still intact because while merging, I had disabled to delete functionality of the F1 branch. So this is the main concept that you need to remember while working on Microsoft Fabric. You can ignore other aspects here like boards, pipelines, etc. The main aspect that you all need, the main conceptual aspect that you need of Azure DevOps in Microsoft Fabric is something called as repositories and branches within the repositories. And Let's rediscuss the hierarchy. I can have one organization. Within that organization, I can have multiple projects. Within multiple projects, I can have, within one project, I can have multiple repositories. Within one repository, I can have multiple branches. But ideally, there should be one branch that should be linked to your production jobs. So this is the hierarchy, and this is how you merge different branches into your common branch or your production branch. That's what we would take a look when we work with Microsoft Fabric. So team, any queries on this basic concept of repositories, branching, organization and project? Pallavi, I see your hand raised. Yes?
No, sorry.
So team, is the concept of Azure DevOps clear?
Yes.
Yes, Anand.
Remember, there's an action on me today to understand how to create a free Azure DevOps. Because of some change, I'll need to go and take a look in that. Tomorrow, I'll provide you all an update on that. And post that, I expect you all to create your own Azure DevOps organization and then the respective projects in your tenant. So now we covered Azure portal, we covered Azure DevOps portal. Now let's come to Microsoft Fabric portal. So there are two ways how you can log into Microsoft Fabric. One is you can log into app.powerbi.com. When you log into app.powerbi.com, of course, you need to log in via your account that are present in that corresponding tenant. In this case, log in via your Fabric administrator account. Correct? So you can log into app.powerbi.com, or you can log into, when you click here, you can log into the Fabric developer experience directly to take you to the Fabric homepage, or you can also work via Power BI homepage as well. Correct? So the easy way is log into app.powerbi.com. So app.powerbi.com with experience equal to Power BI, or app.powerbi.com with experience equal to Fabric is your homepage, similar to Azure DevOps dev.azure.com or portal.azure.com. Those are your home pages. Now let's understand the hierarchy aspect here. So similar to how you have resource groups or projects within the projects within the Azure DevOps, the equivalent of those in Microsoft Fabric is what we call as workspaces. There is an option here called workspaces. Click on the workspaces. Workspace is like a logical grouping of your different projects. So one can consider workspace equivalent as a resource group in Azure portal, or can consider it as equivalent to projects within Azure DevOps. Now, whenever you log into app.powerbi.com, by default, something called as My Workspace is visible. Now, My Workspace is your personal workspace in which you can do anything, but you cannot share whatever you have created with other folks within your organization in My Workspace. Hence, you can ignore the My Workspace concept. My Workspace is for your personal proof of concept purposes. Anything that you create in My Workspace cannot be shared with other users within your organization. So you can go and create a new workspace. Similar to how we created new resource groups, you can create new workspace. Now, when you create a workspace, you have to provide a workspace name. You can provide a description. Now, remember, similar to how resource group names should be unique within the subscription. Similarly, workspace names must be unique within the corresponding tenant. So, Copilot is one of the all workspace name that I have already created within this tenant. Correct. Now, if I try to go ahead and create a workspace with the name Copilot, it will state that not available. But in case if you all are trying to create it with the name Copilot in your tenant, it would be available because workspace name similar to resource group name are specific to your tenant or subscription, and it need not be global unique universally. Now, if you see, the Copilot name was camel notation. Here I have made it all lowercase. So it does not matter. The workspace names are case insensitive, meaning irrespective of whether you all create a workspace name entire capital or entire small, it would consider it one and the same, and it won't allow you to create it. So I'll create a name with deleted demo. I'll add some description. Then comes something called as a domain. Correct? I'll come to this domain concept tomorrow once we go across the Fabric admin portal. Correct? Domain. Just read the terminology here. Assign this workspace to a relevant domain to help people discover the content side. Each workspace can be assigned to only one domain. I'll explain the domain tomorrow. But while creating a workspace, you can associate a workspace with only one domain. Now, in layman terminology, in case if I have to state, what is Power BI or what is Microsoft Fabric or Power BI? It's basically a data analytics and data engine. It's an end-to-end tool, but everything is linked to something called as data. With data comes the concept of data governance and data metadata, data organization and data security. In data world, domain is like what category does your data belong to? Like as an organization, any company would have multiple different data like financial data, sales data, HR data, or marketing data. Correct? How do you think you are fine? You are getting paid. It's via the finance team. So every organization has certain categories of data like HR, finance, marketing, sales, and depending in case if it is medical, hospital, then it can be patient data. There are different categories of data: medicine data, operation data, patient data, etc. Correct. So depending on the data, there are different data categories that one can derive. Those categorization is what is domain. So imagine that if this workspace contains organization sales data, or it contains organization finance data only, I can map this workspace to a finance domain. So this would state that in the data governance aspect, I'll come to the governance automation. Correct? Imagine that an organization would have multiple workspaces. Correct? If I want to understand where all my finance data is present, it is very difficult to go across manually. So what I can do is I can get the list of workspaces within my tenant and its corresponding domain. The workspaces that are associated with the finance domain contains finance data. So domains basically help in data governance aspect to help organizations better manage their data and data metadata. Now, how to create a domain, where to create a domain, who manages the domain, etc. That will take a look tomorrow. But for now, just remember that every workspace can be associated with only one domain. And domain is like a categorization of your data that your administrator decides. So domain can be created by the Fabric administrators. That's the next point that I made. Hence, once I discuss tomorrow the Fabric admin portal, that time I'll cover the concept of domain in detail. But for now, let's go with the concept that domain is like a categorization of your data. And since your workspace is associated with the data, we can associate the domain that it belongs to. Now, there can be certain workspaces that are very generic, that would contain all domain data, correct? Hence, it's not a mandatory aspect that you have to associate a workspace with a domain. It can be none as well. But if you all remember, there was a concept called tags in Azure portal, correct? It was not mandatory, but it was good to have for better data management and governance aspect. Similarly, it's not mandatory to have a domain name, but it's good to have a domain name. Then you can upload an image specific for your workspace, correct? So I'll upload my image, but there is a restriction. It should be less than 45 KB. So it should be the pixel quality and everything should be very aspect, and you can upload an image that should be less than 45 KB. Now comes the concept of licensing, capacities, etc. Before we come to that, and contact. Now imagine that for a workspace, I identified that there's a workspace that is for finance, but I want to reach out to that folk because I want that data. Hence, there is a point of contact associated with the workspace so that users can reach out to that corresponding point of contact in case if they want any access or any queries related to that workspace. Now comes the concept of licensing. Before we proceed to the concept of licensing, any queries? Shweta.
Nandan, the domain that we associate, right? Like, can we filter on that later? I mean, maybe we will cover it tomorrow, but because we are associating a workspace with a domain, can I go and see somewhere like when I click on a domain, what workspaces are associated with it? Does
Yes,
it give an option or it is just an attribute?
it's an option.
Okay.
In my finance domain, as of now, I have two workspaces, Fabric Trial and Fabric Demo. This is the portal view of seeing which all workspaces are associated with that domain. But if you all remember, I had said, correct, Microsoft provides REST APIs for this offering. So there are REST APIs via which I can get the detail of the workspace and its corresponding domain names. Via that, I can get those aspects.
So this
Clear?
is at an admin portal level, right?
Correct. I'll explain that tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
Any queries up till now? Before we move ahead with the licensing aspect? Okay. Now, when you log into app.powerbi.com for the first time via your account, via your Microsoft account, you all would get an option to get a free Power BI license. That free Power BI license is called Power BI Pro license, or you might also get a Power BI PPU license called Power BI Premium license. Now I'll cover this licensing aspect in detail in future sessions, but for now, basically I'll explain in layman terminologies, correct? there is a Power BI Pro license. Before Microsoft Fabric came in 2015, it's been 10 years. In 2025, in June month somewhere, Microsoft would complete 10 years with the concept of Power BI. Correct? So Power BI was the first SaaS tool that Microsoft created in the data world. Outlook, etc. was available earlier as well. I'm talking about this data analytics world. Power BI was the first SaaS tool that Microsoft created. So at that time, Power BI reporting was the only aspect in app.powerbi.com. So for that, you needed a license called Power BI Pro license. So in Power BI Pro license, what happens is at a tenant level, some dedicated capacity is provided, storage space and CPU. So once I create a Power BI, a workspace in Power BI Pro, that common capacity and storage would be leveraged for this workspace. Meaning at an organization level, I have a tenant. In that tenant, I have been provided Microsoft has provided a dedicated capacity and a dedicated storage and a dedicated engine. So anyone who is creating workspaces in the Pro capacity, Pro license mode, is basically leveraging the tenant's capacity and storage aspect. But in order to create a workspace, you need to have a Power BI Pro license minimum. Correct? So once you log into app.powerbi.com, it would ask you to sign in for a 30 days or 60 days. I do not remember because as I said, Microsoft has changed multiple freebies in last couple of months. Correct? But once you log into app.powerbi.com via the account, you would get an option to enable a 30 to 60 days free Fabric license. Sorry, free Power BI license. Now that free Power BI license is Power BI Pro or Power BI Premium per user license. It can be either of these two. But now let's go with the scenario that it provides you with the Power BI Pro. Once you activate your Power BI Pro license, then only you can create workspaces. Now, in Pro, once I associate a workspace with a Pro license, I can only create Power BI reports within that workspace. I cannot create anything other than reports in that workspace. And if you'll remember, I had said that Microsoft Fabric has multiple components like data activator for alerts, real-time intelligence, real-time streaming data. There are databases for storage, and there are data factory or data movement tools. But in case if you create a Pro workspace, those components cannot be created, meaning only Power BI reports can be created. Fabric components other than Power BI cannot be created. And same is the case with Premium per user, wherein Premium per user is like it would allow you to leverage a dedicated capacity for yourself, meaning it won't allow you, meaning the workspace, in case if you create in Premium per user, it would create a dedicated capacity for you. You won't be leveraging the tenants' capacities, but you would be having your own dedicated capacity. But that capacity is specific for you only, for that corresponding user. Then comes trial capacity. Now, this Fabric trial capacity is basically the free capacity that Microsoft provides to create Fabric items. Earlier, Microsoft used to provide certain set of free Fabric trial licenses. You saw, correct? When I went to admin.microsoft.com for licensing aspect, I had around 10,000 free licenses available because I had created this tenant last year itself. And hence I am having this free trial license, free Fabric trial license. But due to the gross misuse by users, Microsoft does not allow free trial license in tenants that have been created recently. Only tenants that have a minimum 60 or 90 days. I do not remember the exact limitation, correct? If a tenant is of minimum 60 or 90, I do not remember the exact count, correct? Do not quote me on that direct aspect. It is either 60 or 90. Only in the tenants that have a minimum duration of 60 or 90 days, then for the accounts you would get, you can enable free Fabric trial license. Since you all have created the tenant recently, you all won't be able to leverage the benefit of Fabric free trial license, unfortunately. Hence, every time you will have to leverage your Fabric capacity itself in case if you have to do some proof of concepts. Hence, that $200 credit needs to be very careful. You all need to be very careful on the $200 credit. Because I and one of the user who had an old tenant has a free Fabric trial enabled. We can independently create trials and keep it as is, workspaces. But for you all need to leverage the Fabric capacity itself. So there is a free Fabric trial. For that, you can see you can create a trial license workspace, wherein select trial to assign this workspace to a Fabric trial capacity. And this would allow you to explore all the capabilities of Microsoft Fabric. There are certain limitations that you cannot leverage Copilot and some features that eventually when we move across the features and functionalities, I will cover which features are supported in trial and which are not. But remember one aspect. Once you get a Fabric free trial, it's like at the backend, Microsoft is providing you a free F64 capacity. So Fabric free trial is like having an F64 capacity, but free. Then there is some premium capacity. Premium capacity was earlier wherein you can, as I said, correct. Pro capacity, pro license is wherein at a tenant level, there are fixed location wherein users are leveraging that. Premium per user is a dedicated capacity specific for that user. Whereas premium capacity is basically you are buying a dedicated capacity for a workspace that you can share with n number of users. And there are some other differences between this licensing as well that we would cover once we actually deep dive into the licensing aspect. Then why am I explaining you all? Because these are the different settings while establishing the workspace, and I need to explain at least the basic so that you understand when you create a workspace. And eventually in the licensing, once I revisit the concept of licensing, this would become much more clearer to you all. So premium capacity is like a dedicated capacity for a workspace that you can share across with multiple users. Now, I do not have any premium capacity with me. Hence, this is a disabled. I do have a Fabric capacity, correct? I had created a Fabric capacity. Then why is this in disabled state? Can anyone guess? Recently, I created a Fabric capacity, correct, called delete capacity. If I had created a Fabric capacity, still why is it showing me in a disabled state? Can anyone guess?
Because of
It is in
size
So I
of
think,
pause state,
yeah,
not so.
This
It's
is paused,
because,
right?
correct,
because we have paused the capacity in portal.
perfect. So now let me go and resume this back. Now I have resumed delete capacity, correct? I have multiple capacities with me that I have created. Let me go to my resource groups. Fabric Copilot. I have a DataShark Copilot capacity as well, correct? So let me resume these two. Please remember me to pause it back. Okay. So I'm resuming two capacities. Now, let me refresh the page to avoid any cache. Now let me again create a new workspace. Now can you all see the fabric capacity is now enabled? Correct. Now in fabric capacity, I can have two capacities because I have created two capacities. I have two active capacities that is in resume state now. Correct. So I can associate a capacity to the corresponding workspace, or I can select a trial capacity in itself. Correct. And then you click on apply. This would create a workspace. Now we saw there are different licenses associated with the workspaces. Correct. Then how do I understand once I log into app.powerbi.com as to which license a workspace is associated with? So for that, once you click on the workspace, corresponding to every workspace, there are certain symbols that are available. Correct. Let's take a look and understand those symbols. Can you see the demo workspace here? The demo workspace here does not have any symbol besides it. It means it's a Power BI Pro workspace. How to validate that? If I click here, once I click on the workspace, this is an active workspace. Correct. Once I click on this workspace, once I click on the workspace settings, I can, and under license information, I can check the corresponding license. It's of type Pro. So the workspaces that are associated with the Pro license do not have any symbols besides it. Now the workspaces that are associated with a dedicated capacity, be it a dedicated premium capacity or a dedicated fabric capacity, those would have a diamond symbol. Now if you see the Copilot workspace, under workspace settings, under license info, it's associated with a dedicated capacity called DataShark Copilot of F64 capacity in North Europe region, because the capacity belongs to this. So any workspace that is associated with a dedicated premium capacity or a dedicated fabric capacity would have a diamond symbol. Any workspace created with a fabric trial capacity would have a diamond and this symbol. Let me zoom in a little. It would have this symbol, and if you hover over that, it would state that it's a Microsoft Fabric trial workspace. So this combination indicates that it's a Microsoft Fabric pre-trial workspace. Then there was a PPU, that is premium per user work license as well. Correct. It's this symbol. Okay, let me show another one. Correct. Let me minimize this. Now let me create a workspace with PPU capacity. Delete PPU, advanced, premium per user, and apply. Correct. So A premium per user license, as I said, is a dedicated capacity, but for a specific user. Hence, beside you get a diamond symbol, but you see a user symbol as well. Can you see a user symbol? So a diamond with a user symbol indicates that it's a premium per user license workspace. Then what does this circular represent? This circular represent that these workspaces have been associated with some domain. And when you hover over that domain, you would be able to see the respective domain that workspace is a part of. So this is how you create a workspace within Microsoft Fabric or Power BI. So a workspace can be considered as equivalent to a resource group in Azure portal terminology. Now, in case if I want to delete a workspace, I have to go to that workspace, under workspace settings, under general section, click on the remove workspace option. This would delete it. So team, any queries up till now on the creation of a workspace and the properties associated while creation of the workspace, and what does different licenses signify and how to identify those workspace based on the different symbols? Any queries up till now?
And then so we can like assign different capacity which created in portal. So we can multiple capacity assigned to the multiple workspaces, right?
One workspace can be associated with only one capacity, but one
Yes.
capacity can be used across multiple workspaces.
Yeah.
Meaning, let's take an example, correct?
And
The
different like suppose we have multiple workspaces, so we can assign different capacity as well, right? For
That's what I'm
different.
coming to, Ramesh.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
Correct. Now, the Copilot workspace that is present here, a workspace can be associated with only one capacity. So as of now, the Copilot workspace is associated with the DataSharks Copilot capacity. Correct. Now, I can create a workspace, a new workspace, and leverage the same capacity, that is Copilot capacity. There is no restriction to the number of workspaces a capacity can be used. Correct?
Yeah.
Because see, you are paying 26,000, I guess it was 26,000 or 26 lakhs, correct? It for every workspace, you cannot keep on buying a capacity. So a capacity can be reused across multiple workspaces. But I'll explain of the proper optimization, how to manage capacities, etc. once we actually go into the concept of capacity. As of now, the concept is understanding the Fabric portal itself. Clear?
Yeah.
So, while creating a workspace, I can create a workspace. A workspace can be associated with only one capacity, but one capacity can be associated, can be aligned in multiple workspaces. Any queries, team, up till now? Now let me quickly pause my capacities since I do not need it for the rest of the session. Any queries before we proceed ahead? Okay, I'll consider it as a no. So, once we create a workspace, for now, let me go ahead and create a workspace in trial capacity. So, now I'll create a workspace with the Fabric trial capacity. Since I have disabled all my Fabric capacities, the next logical hierarchy is the trial. Imagine that if I, so basically by default, there is a radio button enabled, correct? It's the hierarchical aspect. The most top privilege is the fabric capacity. Post that comes premium capacity. Since I do not have either of that, then comes the fabric trial. If I do not have fabric trial, then comes premium, then comes pro. Meaning, imagine if I only have pro and premium, by default, this radio button would be enabled. So this default radio button is based on the top aspect that I have. So I'll create a trial capacity workspace. Now, once we create a workspace, under manage access, I can grant users access to that workspace. If you all remember, it's similar to access control IAM in resource group. How you can grant different users access on the resource group? Similarly, via manage access. So under workspaces, you can click on the ellipses and click on workspace access to directly go to the access, or you can click on the workspace name and go to the manage access section. Once you go to the manage access section, there is an option to add people or groups. Before we proceed, correct? Here you can see, correct? There is an option to add peoples or groups. Can I add applications or service principals to the workspace based on this aspect? I'll give you all 1 minute to think, correct? Think carefully before you answer. So my question is, here there is an option to add people or groups, correct? Does that mean I can only add people or groups and I cannot add applications and service principals? Or I cannot add because it allows only people and groups or groups? Take 1 minute time and think carefully.
Cannot add.
I'll let everyone think, correct? And then I want an answer from everyone. Who all feel that you cannot add service principals or apps within or managed identity, meaning in general enterprise applications within this workspace? So 1 out of 8. So
So we
are
can,
the remaining?
I think we can add.
I think we can only add people and groups. The resource that means no.
See here, it's clearly stating, correct? You can add people or groups. Is it stating you can add service principals or enterprise applications?
No.
Then what should I conclude from this?
No, you can only add people and groups.
Unfortunately, that's not the case. You can add enterprise applications and other aspects as well. This is, see, these are UI interfaces, correct? We are also developers. Microsoft also had developers. They also have certain bugs or not bugs. This is not a bug per se. I can consider it a bug that it's an incomplete information, correct? These are UI enhancements that they need to take. So hence I always state that in Microsoft world, never trust anything that you see. Explicitly go and try it out yourself. Remember that. So now I can add multiple enterprise. I can add users. I can add enterprise applications, and I can add groups. Correctly.
Security groups we can also add.
Sorry.
Security groups.
That's I'll
We
cover
can add.
whether we can add security
Yeah.
or M365. As I said, I'll cover everything. Can you see app_Power BI? These are the different application app ID, meaning you can add enterprise applications. Correct? But there is a catch. In order to add applications at a workspace level, you need to enable a property in the Fabric admin portal. If you'll remember, similar to the concept of resource provider, in Azure subscription, you had to enable a resource provider for you all to proceed with that. Correct? Similarly, in order for you to leverage service principal, or to be more specific, enterprise applications at a Power BI level, you have to enable a property in the admin portal. That we will take a look tomorrow once we cover the admin portal aspect. Correct? But for now, we would take a look with respect to the different applications. Sorry, the different access aspect. So for now, let me grant this app.Power BI access on this workspace. Now, there are only 4 levels of access that you can provide at a workspace. In case if you all remember, in resource group, there were so many different roles. Correct? There was reader, writer, admin, contributor, ex-reader, ex-contributors, etc. Correct? Because that was a platform as a service. This being a software as a service, there are limitations with respect to the roles and permission that you can assign. Unlike Azure portal, wherein you could create your own custom roles, wherein you can define granular permissions, in Fabric, unfortunately, there are only these 4 roles that can be associated, or permission that can be assigned. You cannot create your own custom permission or role, or you cannot assign any other role. So now let's understand what does these 4 different permissions represent. First is, as the name suggests, viewer permission. That's the lowest permission that one can grant a user at a workspace level. A user who has been granted a viewer access can, as the name suggests, can only view the objects that are created in this workspace. He cannot modify, delete, or add any new components within that workspace. Then comes contributor access. A user with a contributor access can make any changes at the workspace level. When I say changes at the workspace level, I'm wrong in that statement. I'll apologize on that. Let me be more clear. A user with a contributor access can delete, add, or update any existing components that has been within the workspace. Meaning, the contributor can add new items, delete an existing report that has been created, or modify any changes, modify the objects within the workspace. But a contributor cannot add any other user within the workspace. A user with a member access has all the privileges of a contributor. But along with that, he or she can add any other users within the workspace at a role of member or below. Meaning a member can add other users to a workspace, but at a member role or below. An admin is the highest role at a workspace level, wherein an admin can add users with another admin role. Member can only add permission till member only, but an admin can add another admin role and can modify the settings at a workspace level. So an admin can make changes with respect to the licensing aspect, can go ahead and remove the entire workspace. And there's some other privileges as well. So tomorrow, once in the summer, in the initial 5 to 10 minutes, I'll cover the exact difference between these 4 permissions in a tabular format in the PPT. So it would help you recollect all the concepts. But for today, in layman terminology, these concepts are sufficient to understand that viewer is the lowest permission with a user can just log into that workspace and check what all components are available. Contributor is a role wherein a user can add, delete, or modify the components within the workspace, but cannot add any other users. A member is a permission wherein he can do everything that a contributor can do, but he or she can add other users as member or contributor or a viewer. An admin is the highest permission that a user can get, via which he can add other users to a workspace as an admin, and he or she can remove workspace, change the fabric capacity, workspace capacities, etc. Now, let me add a enterprise application as a member. Now, as I said, it is because a property has to be enabled in the admin portal in order for us to leverage the concept of service principals. Hence, here you do not see service principals or enterprise applications. By default, with the default settings, you can only add groups or users. I'm verifying whether my capacities have been paused or not to preserve my capacity. So do bear for 1 minute. Both are paused. Now let me go to the Active Directory. Now let's search the users. Correct? Now we saw that we can add an application. Now let's check with respect to users. Can I add external users and can I add internal users? So now in add, let me search a username. It's Adele. ADELE. So I can grant Adele a viewer access, meaning internal users can be granted access. Now, I'll ask a question later, correct? Now let's search for an external user. External user is invitation, correct? So nandan.gajanan.hegde@gmail.com _Gmail. Correct? So add nandan.gajanan, correct? @_Gmail. Correct? So external users can be added or can be granted access at a workspace level, but they cannot be granted access of the Fabric administrator capacitor aspect. Now, once I have added the users, can I modify their permissions? Yes. So now let's say I want to modify the external users permission from contributor to admin. It auto saves now. Now it can be auto saved, meaning now the external user is a admin for this workspace. Let me go and validate it again. Can you see this external user is now an admin? So we saw we can add users, be it internal users or external users. We can add enterprise applications, and now let's test with respect to the concept of groups. Correct? Security group and M365 group. Let's take a look whether you can add that or not. So app_Power BI is a security group. Let me copy the object ID and search via the object ID. Because you cannot use invalid or duplicate names. emails because okay, app underscore Power BI. Let me take another security group, which is DataShark ADF. Why isn't it finding it from that way? Because I have to explicitly provide the name DataSharks ADF group. Can you see I'm able to see the DataSharks ADF group? I'll add it as a viewer role. So it is possible to add security groups within the workspace that we saw now in manage access. But can we add M365 group, let's say retail, or let's say sales and marketing? Any guesses whether we can add it or not?
We can add.
Yeah, we can add.
So M365 groups can also be added because, as I said, M365 group contains all the users with email enablement, correct? But you cannot grant licenses at that group level, but it also acts like a security group in itself, but with some additional aspects like SharePoint, Teams, etc. So we saw that we can grant access to everything within the Active Directory, everything within the Active Directory, users, enterprise applications, and groups, and you can provide any of the 4 permissions that are available. So any queries on granting access, on creating the workspace? Shweta, I see your hand raised. Any queries? I'll take
No,
it
it's
as
by mistake. No, it's by mistake.
okay. Now let's go to the concept of workspace settings. Correct? Here, this was the initial setting that I did. But there are some other level of settings as well. Like general is the one that we fulfill. License info is what we saw. Correct?
Nandan, just a question on the OneDrive aspect. In general, yeah.
I'll come to that. Correct.
Okay.
That because there are some other aspects as well, like OneDrive, Azure Data Lake Storage, like Azure Connections.
Okay.
Correct. Azure Log Analytics. What does this imply? But this I'll take after 2 or 3 sessions. Correct. Because these are some of the Azure aspect related, not specific to Microsoft Fabric in general. As the first primary is Azure. So first I need to explain you all these concepts of Azure and OneDrive, and then I'll be able to explain this. Correct?
Okay.
So now there are some other settings as well that you all can see. But now we would be covering only the concept of workspace identity and Git integration. Now I created a workspace with, this is a trial capacity, correct? I'm able to see this workspace identity feature. Now let me go to a workspace of Power BI Pro. Let me go to the workspace setting, workspace identity. Here also it is present. What does this workspace identity here signify? It's similar to the managed identity concept that we had discussed yesterday. Correct? So basically, in the Azure Active Directory under Enterprise Applications, we would see an application name called Demo Workspace. So Demo Workspace is like enabling the identity for this corresponding workspace at the Active Directory level, so that it can be used for some managed identity authentication and authorization purposes, I can delete the workspace identity for this, meaning I do not want a identity specific to this workspace. So then automatically this got removed. So this is one setting at a workspace level wherein I can enable the what I can say, I can enable the workspace identity. Then comes the concept of Git integration. Can you see when I click on Git integration, I get an error stating that you need a premium license for this workspace to continue. Premium meaning Git integration can only be enabled on the workspace in the workspaces that have a dedicated capacity, like the premium capacity, Fabric trial capacity, or the dedicated Fabric capacity. So for that setting, I need to go to my Fabric trial workspace. Okay, not this workspace. What was the workspace name that I had created? A delete trial capacity. Sorry, my fault. So now in this workspace, under workspace setting, we identified that you can enable a managed identity for the workspace. But then we can also integrate this workspace to a Azure DevOps or a GitHub repository. So these settings, how to integrate it, what property needs to be enabled, Fabric admin aspects we would cover in the next session, and some of the other workspace settings. So today we finished on the concept of Azure Portal, Fabric Portal, and Azure DevOps. Tomorrow, and we covered creating Fabric workspace, assigning Fabric capacity. Tomorrow we would cover ADO integration and Fabric admin portal. And then we would be done with the introduction aspect of the bootcamp. And then in subsequent sessions, we would start on Microsoft Fabric in detail. So team, any queries?
Nandan, one question, can you go back to that workspace identity, that concept?